So we're on page 393, I believe, right? Together. Are we?
Yeah.
I think it was. Let me do this
You
class.
just want me to start from the top?
Yeah. Hang on a second. Lev, you with us?
And I'm with you.
Okay, we're starting on 393.
Okay. Fortunately, I read all this again today. I feel
Excellent.
pretty fresh, very fresh. So it was a review. So I kind of like don't think I'm gonna space out on you trying to like, what are you talking? Because we did this last week. So Baruch Hashem.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
All right. So let us now return to the subject we were talking about, namely God's attribute of just and perfect judgment. The nature of the world in this phase of time, which includes the entire period of man's divine service with all its details and consequences, depends entirely on God's attribute of judgment. The reason for the centrality of this attribute is that this is the place and the time that God prepared in order to reveal the justice of his judgment. The nature of this world cannot be perfected until this judgment is properly carried out. As is written, God has become known. He has executed judgment. God has become elevated through his judgment. A king through judgment establishes the land. The reason judgment is essential is that it is not at all good for the world when God allows the wicked to revel and attain a position of dominance while the righteous are oppressed and evil is victorious. This is certainly not good for the world, but negative. What is good for the world is the opposite, when God executes judgment, humbling the wicked and lowering the arrogant, elevating the righteous and raising their honor.
So we really have to, Don, are you taking a deep dive into this book?
I have reached an age now where I cannot see close up with my glasses on. So it's
Oh,
Me too, and Nitzan as well. All three of
yeah, welcome to the club. Wait, with your glasses, yeah, that's why I'm not wearing my glasses
so
now.
that's why my head's down here. If that's what you were. Is that what you meant by deep dive?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I need a what's the thing called? The holds the book, the
Stender.
thank you. Yes.
Stender. Yeah. So, okay, friends, what did we just read? Justice is good, and we all actually sense injustice. Right? So it's an amazing thing, I think, built into the human conscience, that even from a very young age, people can sense injustice. And there's a lot of it's a very deep drive, right, to gain justice. Some of our, I think, superficially, but our desire to see equal distribution of wealth, our desire, am I speaking to any fellow communists here? Right? No, not those guys in Washington, D.C. breaking it in.
Anyone else taking his name down? I got it. You guys are good.
I already tweeted it and Facebooked. They're coming to get him. So
okay. Now let's just put this book together, right? Really, this book is about that there's something besides God's judgment going on. Are you okay there, Gil?
Ignore my eyes. I've got allergies going on, so I feel like I'm going to scratch my eyeballs out with the tree pollen.
Oh gosh.
That's all.
God.
I've got drops, but the next step is just to remove them. So just ignore my
Okay, fine.
wild thing like that. Sorry.
So
That's meth for you.
Stay out of the wife's supply.
Yes, in fact, yeah. Elaine, it's my wife. She didn't tell me.
Okay, so our job is to put these two huge systems together, right? God creating a world which is deficient and then eventually bringing it to its perfection, to reveal Ein Od Milvado, that there's nothing besides him. Anything else you thought that was worthwhile, fulfilling, powerful, you name it. No, there's nothing besides, right? God is it. And that's what we're going to come to see. In order for that to be established, there has to be what's called in yeshiva, right, in the Gemara, a hava amina. No, Lev, what's a hava amina?
Don't know, but is that the word that's like Haganah? I
Hava
was gonna
amina?
look it up. It sounds like Haganah, but
No,
is that the word? What did you say? Mina?
hava amina. It's Aramaic. So
I
hava
don't know.
is like from hoveh, and amina means I would say, meaning what I would say, what I would have said. Hava, yeah, haya omer, what I would have said, meaning, I so the possibility of seeing something else besides God, right? The possibility that people would come to see other things as fulfilling, meaningful, powerful, etc., as the ultimate power, is really what God had to let be in order to show that no, there's nothing besides him, right? That's the what the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, come in here, meaning I would have thought that, so you could live without God pretty successfully. Kamash Malon, come in here. The verse says, "B'yamahu Hashem echad u'shmo echad." Right, on that day, God will be one, and His name will be one. So that by force means there has to be at least the possibility of what we call evil, right? Evil is really everything else, right? Anything else besides that oneness, that unity of God revealed. On the other hand, now he says, but hang on a second, that's a very subtle, almost invisible wave going through history, right? This clarification of God's oneness. The revealed way that God runs the world is justice, right? Right, when God executes, I'm just reading the last sentence over here. When God executes judgment, humbling the wicked and lowering the arrogant. We love it when that happens. Elevating the righteous and raising their honor. I don't know what your guys' political views are or whatever, but it's amazing to read this when we see what's happening in Ukraine, which seems such a injustice, going on.
Rabbi, can I ask a question? I know there are lots of places in the Bible where murder or killing is considered bad, but what are the cases, and what is sort of the first maybe case of justified homicide in the Bible? Where does that come up in the Torah? Like, is it?
Yeah.
I mean,
so there's the death sentence. That's definitely part of it. I'm just trying to think of the.
Is there any story in which someone commits an act of murder and it's not considered bad?
Amalek, right?
Well, when. Yeah, the
That's an
wars,
injunction.
the wars
Right.
against Amalek, etc.
War.
It's a bit of a debate, even in Hebrew. Even in the Hebrew, is ritzicha different to hariga, meaning is murder different to killing? And it seems to be that murder has its own definition, meaning murder is unjust killing. Just killing is something else, right? That's the being the death penalty, that's killing Amalek, or going to war.
Right. So is there in a case also in a sense a positive injunction to
Kill?
not necessarily to, well, if necessary.
Yes.
For example, what's our moral obligation to the Ukrainians if we take the belief that the Putin is a crazy madman and we need to stop this guy? What's the moral obligation in that context?
Okay, so it would start from Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. Do not stand by idly when your brother's blood is flowing. So now, the Talmud is very focused on the Jewish people, and normally says that the word re'echa means your buddy, you're the one similar to you, actually. So you might get many halachicists saying, wait, that's talking about Jews. That's not talking about non-Jews. So
between and among Jews, not necessarily an
Right.
injunction to
right, to fellow nations, etc. Although many would say, okay, you're not absolutely obligated to do it, but it would be the right thing to do. It's a big question whether the reason why so many of these mitzvot are Jew-centric, is that because that's all we really care about? Which can't be right, because this book is full of it, right? The whole world has to come to some sort of rectification. We're all connected. Is it because the way it's going to work, the rectification will be through example, meaning we'll become such an exemplary nation, we don't need to treat other people like this, but other people say, hey, they do such a good job, let's be like the Cohens. Or the other explanation is that, God kind of said, this is what I demand of you. This is what I'm, practice amongst yourself. And eventually you'll become such a great nation where this should flow to the, light unto the nations, that this will flow to the rest of peoples. So I think, of course, there's a great injustice, and we should, we should not stand by idly at all. Now, the question is raised, how far do you need to go? How much danger do you have to put yourself into in order to save another person, right? Lo Aleinu, whatever. They also, Moshe Feinstein, I think they said, can't remember what the case was, but something like your buddy's being chomped by a great white shark. Do you get in there to try and save him? There's a bit of a problem, is because if you get in, there's a good chance you're going to get chomped. So he says his opinion is like this: you may not do it if you will die. So meaning, if there's a reasonable chance that you yourself will die, you can't give up your own life. That's chayecha koidmim, your life comes first. That's a whole story with Rabbi Akiva in the desert. You got one thing of water, there are two of you, and you should, you drink it. And in fact, you're not allowed to give it away, right? You have to at least survive before anyone else's survival, right? I always get, always ask myself, like, did they read Gemara on the airplanes when they tell you, and make sure to pull down your own oxygen first? I'm like, that's an ethical question. That's like, what are you saying? Like, how do you know? Oh, Rabbi Akiva. Okay. So it might be a practical question too, right? It might be.
in that case, yeah.
Let me ask you this. Are there any rabbis that have any opinions or support of, like, if there's an animal suffering and you see an animal and you're supposed to put it out of its misery, why does that not apply to human beings?
Because we're not allowed to, are you talking about euthanasia? like an older
Talking about
person
like
suffering.
somebody that's like, they're gonna die, but
Yeah.
they got
Well,
they got 2 weeks left to live, and there's like no doubt they're just, if they continue living, they're just gonna be
Hey, Lev,
miserable,
I'll come back to your
suffering.
question because it's
Yeah,
gonna
it's a
derail my.
whole. I know. I didn't want to get into
Yeah,
it, but yeah,
I'll tell you, it's interesting. It's interesting what the sages say. So so back to Rav Moshe Feinstein. So he said you cannot give up your own. You cannot put your own life in reasonable danger. So what about losing a limb? So he said that's up to you. So you're not obligated to, but you are not forbidden to. He said that's up to you. So yeah, I mean that's on a national level. That's
A reasonable practice that we could risk our limb, but not our life.
Yeah, and maybe
In a national sense,
maybe
so
the
reasonable.
fact that we America's gone and made all these sanctions, and that's almost like, yeah, of course there's a great loss to America due to that. I mean, I don't know how much fuel
Tremendous.
costs where you are, but this is
that is a whole nother thing. The oil companies still have plenty of oil. It's greed and profit. There's no reason why the gas has to be that price. It's all greed. Their profit margins are the only thing that matters, and there are no regulations.
Apparently Biden
problem.
called up the Saudis and said, do you mind pumping a little bit more at this time? And they were like, how much is gas a barrel right now? Like, no, we're quite happy.
Right. Why? It's no regulations, and the people that are getting hurt the most are the people that voted for these imbeciles to deregulate everything. Whole nother story. Don't get me.
Okay, then we'll wait for the barbecue.
I'm telling you.
Okay, so I don't know. Take it. That would be the guidance. I imagine that he's on a national scale. I understand America not going in, to risk a nuclear war. Like, sorry, I feel terrible for the Ukrainians, and but okay, let's risk a limb. Not a bad kind of.
Do you think the Ukrainians expected this type of a response when they signed the treaty and disposed of all their nuclear weapons? Like, I mean, we're supposed to just
I haven't seen that in the news so much, Lev.
They don't talk about the things that are like the real meat.
But why isn't like what's his name? Zelensky. Why isn't he like screaming about that? Like, come on, you signed this. Oh, Baruch Hashem, Ori's here to help us get back to learning.
Hi, everybody.
I'm sorry.
Hey, Ori. No.
Sorry, I'm late.
It was a very good question. Yeah, Lev, I think I'll tell you what's said about that, like end of life issues and having mercy, actually. Okay, Ori, we on page 393 in the English, 392 in the Hebrew.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And his if evil is going to exist, there needs to be a system of judgment, which will regulate it. Right? That's pretty much what he said. I don't know if anyone wants to argue, say something else. Okay, go on, Jason. So we write it right on the bottom, and
so is written, when judgment is carried out, the righteous person is joyful. When the wicked are destroyed, there is rejoicing. Therefore, when God gives the wicked free rein to act as they wish, and they gain power over the world, destroying justice and righteousness, it is said that God is sleeping, as it were. When God awakens from the sleep, it is said that God awoke like one who had been sleeping, and he beat his enemies into retreat. If God truly wanted to guide the world through pure loving kindness and benevolence in a way that there would be no evil but only good, this would have been considered perfection for the world. But there would have been no possibility of sinning whatsoever, and no deeds that could harm and pervert that which was good. Such a state will indeed come about at the time of the future redemption. As it is written, sin will disappear from the world, and our sages has emphasized that it is sins which will disappear and not sinners. Had God set up the world in such a way, the world would have directed through pure loving kindness. There would be no desire to do evil, and everyone would perforce serve God. About such a time it is written, I will cause you to follow my statutes. But when God holds back his judgment until the wicked have sinned enough to bring harsh punishment upon themselves, this is certainly not a situation of pure loving kindness, but of terrible severity. In the meantime, the world exists in a situation of terrible desolation, and in the end, the wicked will be wiped out anyway. On the contrary, as I have already mentioned, the verse says, he who loves his son disciplines him while he was still young. It is also written, from all the nations of the world, I have loved only you. Therefore, I will hold you accountable for all your sins. And our sages have explained this to mean that God punishes the Jewish people little by little so that their evil deeds should not accumulate, since that would necessitate their decimation. God forbid. Rather, he wants to see them to be perfected, as I've explained. We can therefore see that when God finds favor in the world, he continuously, as it were, in judgment over it.
Sorry, Jason, sorry. Okay. What does he do for the other nations? What's the inference?
I think the other nations have a set of laws that they're expected to fulfill as well, ascribed to the time of Noah, right?
Yeah, but what I mean, Ori, is it says here, from all the nations of the world, I have loved only you. Rak etchem yadati. Therefore, Al Kain, I will hold you accountable for all your sins. Efkod aleichem et kol avonatechem.
That's just like my wife. I love you, and therefore I will hold you accountable for all of your sins. That's merit. That's great.
Pretty much. Why?
Cheers, man.
Why done? Because she knows your potential and wants you to reach it. Eza Kenegdo, she's there. She's helping. She's getting you to where you really need to be. So my question is just, what about the other nations of the world?
I believe that there's lesser expectations of him.
I think we both responded at the same time, but I was saying he doesn't hold them to as high of a standard.
Well, they don't have as many mitzvot. So yeah, in a way, they're not as commanded. So therefore you can't expect, God doesn't expect that much of them, as much of them. But it seems from what I've read is that God actually does not, like he says here, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says that God punishes the Jewish people little by little so that their evil deeds should not accumulate. That's not true by the nations of the world. There, God lets their evil deeds accumulate little by little until he then decimates them. Right? I'm in the middle of a fierce argument with two people who claimed unbelievably that this is what's happening with the Ukrainians.
I want to add in a very unfortunate conversation that I'd had when there was that tsunami, maybe 4 years ago or 3 years ago, that instantaneously wiped out 100,000 or 150,000 people in the Far East. Was it in Thailand?
It's 2004.
Well, the Thailand one was 2004.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Perhaps. Gosh, I can't recall, but
There was one in Japan and
Yeah,
that was,
Japan or whatever. Anyway, someone said something like that,
yes. With regards to,
right?
know,
Yeah, the
in Ukraine-
morality of the Thai people, blah, blah, blah. So how do we, there is, so, go back a page, right? What does it say? Right at the top,
allowing
when judgment,
evil to exist to destroy it.
when judgment is carried out, the righteous person is joyful, right? When the wicked are destroyed, there is rejoicing. That's a good thing. It's a good thing when the wicked get destroyed. So, what's your answer to that? Besides being in shock?
I think that all people seek, well, not all, but generally speaking, people seek that justice prevail. But we're supposed to not be glad, frankly, at the punishment of even our enemies, right? That's the blessing that we say before we go to bed. That people ought not be punished because of the harm they did to us.
Right.
So that would be conflicting with something so straightforwardly cutting like this. I don't know.
Are we
Yeah,
supposed to say the evening Shema, the bedtime Shema, in addition to the Mariv Shema? You have to say it again? The whole thing all over again. There's like, it's like
It's not. It's
10 more
the
pages.
first, it's the first paragraph.
Just the Via Hafta and Shema.
Well, yeah, that's part of Shema. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I looked up the bedtime Shema. It's like all this other stuff.
Yeah, there are, over time, people have had a long time of Jewish history to add stuff to the Siddur. Yeah, sorry, I meant to call you. Sorry, I need to call. I'll put that on the list. Let's discuss.
Okay.
Krishma Lamita, good one.
Yeah.
So I think two things. There definitely is precedence for this, meaning the wicked are destroyed, etc., etc. But just like he said over here, it's not the people that we want destroyed, it's their sins. Where did he say that? Yeah, in the middle of 395, right? Sins will disappear from the world. Our sages have emphasized that it is sins which will disappear and not sinners. So when there's genocide, that's a pretty big thing, right? That's not just sins, that's sinners. If you're going to say that this happens, first of all, you'd need to be a prophet. We haven't had prophecy for like 2,000 years now. No verified prophet. So who on earth could come along and say, I see that this is what's happening? Because there's no prophet, I think we have to think, well, what's the alternate? Right? The alternate is that there's a terrible injustice here and we should support the Ukrainians full-heartedly. I think one should err most definitely on that side, right? Because the alternate is cruel. Yeah, it's a very cruel thing. Could it possibly be true? Yeah, it could be. We don't know God's ways. We don't really understand them 100%. There does seem to be precedent like that. Another big issue I have with these people is it says actually in the Ten Commandments that do not serve any other foreign gods, don't have any of, and God will remember the sins of the parents onto the third and fourth generation. So right there, Rashi says, hang on a second, there's another verse that says that children do not die for the sins of their parents, right? Lo yamutu banim al avon avotav or something, right? Children don't die for the sins of their parents. So Rashi says, oh, that's talking about when the children are different to the parents. But if the children hold on to the sin of the parent, then it really gets ingrained and, God might take it out on them. So I don't know, are the Ukrainians today terrible people? Do we have any evidence of them being, Nazi collaborators en masse? I don't think
Today or a long time ago?
Sorry? No,
Today?
so when people, these people are saying, well, the Ukrainians were so bad to the Jewish people, now they're getting their just dessert. I have a problem with that. Wait, hang on a second. The Ukrainians today seem pretty civilized, Anyway, we digress once again, but I think an important one. Okay, Jason, where are you up to? On page 397, we can therefore see.
We can therefore see that when God finds favor in the world, he continuously sits, as it were, in judgment over it. In this way, he gradually cleanses the world of any evil as it arises. In this way, the things of the world become perfected and receive blessing, and all prosper greatly. However, if there is no merit in the world, God forbid, and wickedness abounds, God says, I will hide my presence from them. I will surely hide my presence on that day. Immediately darkness prevails as the world becomes filled with wickedness and foolishness, wisdom is scorned, truth is cast aside, and everything in the world becomes ruined and liable to destruction. Our sages have already told us, since the time that Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, there is no day that is not accursed, more than its predecessor. And even the flavor of fruits has been removed. There is no success in either physical or spiritual matters. Now, if God's intention were to only punish the wicked, their sins would already have caused the world to be destroyed. However, God's intention is only to bestow good, and his punishment and rebuke are merely a consequence of his love, as I explained. Therefore, he chose to configure the world in a way that it would be able to continue existing even at the time when it lacks merit, by guaranteeing a basic level of existence that would not change or falter. For this purpose, God makes use of his exalted majesty and power, which is not subject to any limitation or constraint. In this way, he is able to keep the world going when man is unworthy. However, this concept needs to be understood properly, as it involves many different factors. It would seem that in such a situation, the sinner is unfairly rewarded, since the world continues to exist without needing merit. Furthermore, it exists through God's attribute of kindness and love as the direct result of the wicked. However, once you understand all the different factors involved, you'll be able to see the profound wisdom contained within the way God runs the world, and that there is no unfair reward. You have already learned.
Hang on a second, Jason. Someone want to try summarize what we just read?
No, you're addicted. No, you're addicted. You are addicted.
I don't know. It has something to do with keeping the world going. And somehow, even if evil does exist, there's that, I mean, I don't know, it's like all mixed up, but there's that alternating or fluctuating, attenuating emanation, the good stops coming, everybody's evil, the good just stops, but the world can keep going. And then eventually it's so that the evil can be destroyed. And I don't know, that might have been too many other parts mixed up, but it says,
I it's like a baseline level of merit that God is willing to grant the world, grant humanity, even if we're not worthy of it, so that he's not obligated to sort of withdraw completely. So he's like spotting humanity at times, merit that we don't necessarily earn.
And then he can't immediately fix all the bad stuff because then that diminishes the freedom of man to choose good. So he's got to kind of keep it rolling while man gets his act together, because that's his shot at the whole thing. That's why we're in this mess, so to speak, to begin with. It's a chance to make it good.
And then on 397, we see that we need to be on a certain level to merit God's justice, judgment, right? It's a bit counterintuitive. You know, you think the more wicked a person is, the more judgment there'd be on him. But no, like in a way, God, I don't know how to put it all together, but it's.
He has to love you to judge you, and if you're not being good, right?
Yeah,
You're not asking for his love, but he's going to spot you some anyway, as Gil said.
Maybe we can summarize it in 3 consecutive statements.
okay.
First, God is not bound by any system that might make sense to us. And then because of his goodness, he wants to keep the world going despite whatever amount of evil happens in the world. That's number 1. Number 2, he has more expectations and thus more judgment toward people who generally are good when they go astray. And number 3, there is the appearance that people who do evil get away with it. But it isn't really true, and he's going to tell us perhaps in a bit
Right.
why that is not true.
Excellent.
I think those are the
Thank
3
you.
statements in the last paragraph.
Yeah, and that just a caveat is that last question is at a time when the world does not merit judgment, right? So the evil people getting away with it is because God has hidden his face. God says, right? Thinking why would God do that? What's the logic of that?
It's only when this stuff. Oh, sorry, please.
No, go ahead.
Well, that's what gives you the opportunity to do good, right? That's what we've been hitting on since the beginning. He could have made the world this perfect place, and we would have been in the Garden of Eden if Adam had made the right choice right away, but he didn't. So we have to face a world full of evil in order to make good choices.
And in addition, we have free
To
will.
merit reward, yeah.
So you're saying like this, you're saying as if we would get our act together as human beings and recognize God and go in his ways, his judgment over us would almost be like a sort of a reward, or it would be commensurate with our level.
Would be earned.
Yeah, it would be.
We would have earned that judgment by love, right? By earning the love.
And it wouldn't take away our free will, because that's a recognition we've come to. But if we backslide and we are, we don't follow God's ways and we do all these other things, if God would then punish us there, that would be an imbalance, because, well, hang on a second, right? I need to choose good. Now you almost, God would be forcing us to do good through his judgment. So interesting. Wow. So it's absolutely.
But he's still not going to let it go too far out of hand.
Yes.
Right? He's not going to let it. And that's the thing about spotting us some amount of merit.
That's why
unearned merit.
We've all still got gas in the car. Let's see if that's why that's true. Okay.
The one thing with that was it was sort of, and maybe I'm misremembering, but And he flooded the earth and wiped out everything and started anew, basically, with Noah.
Yeah.
And he puts a little rainbow up to say that I'll never do that again. Like, was that? I didn't really know how to square that with what Ron Call sort of wrote about.
What, over here?
Through this, part 2 and then, part 3, I guess it is. Or,
Yeah.
Still part 3.
I guess that's the minimum. Sorry, my WhatsApp's connected to my. Can I mute it? Can I mute WhatsApp?
He's just going to mute us. He doesn't care.
Yeah, I don't think I can mute it.
Get rid of those people.
I mean, Jason, I guess that's the minimum amount that God keeps the world going by. It's pretty
One family.
small,
Okay.
but he didn't destroy the world. Look at us, we're 7 billion strong. Yeah, why? I guess there comes a time when, yeah, that was an interesting thing. He is, you don't think, I can't remember from pre-reading it, if he does speak about this flood directly in the section 3.
I mean, he talks about the 2,000 years
Right.
and how,
Right.
Egypt is part of the first 2,000 years, although it somehow comes later, and I didn't quite understand that bit. But I don't know. I was just
Right. Yeah, I had the question, but I would say at this stage, that's what it means. At this stage, yeah, that's how God kept it going. Although, yeah, I know, because there's no question after the flood. What is did the wicked prosper in some way? No, they got wiped out, right? So I don't think that was something else. Okay.
right.
Where are we up to? Oh, in the middle of 399.
399. Yeah.
Okay.
You have already learned, beginning of part 1, that the only reason sins can cause damage and good deeds can cause benefit is that God himself brought this about through an act of divine will. God also put in place a perfect and just system of rules to govern this process, and it is upon the system that every aspect of the world depends for its success. When God exercises judgment by applying this whole system, the world prospers in every possible way. If man's sins lead him to despise, as it were, the inhabitants of the world and distance himself from them, the system falls into chaos, since God does not enforce it. As a result, the entire world descends into a state of total disorder, God forbid. In contrast, when God enforces all the elements of the system so that they function properly, each part of the creation functions harmoniously in its proper place. However, there is another system through which the world is governed at a time when the merits of the Jewish people are numerous. Such a situation will exist at the time of the final redemption, when the world will become completely perfected. God will then transform the world into a state of total good, removing all evil from it. As a result, the soul will no longer be subject to the effects of the evil inclination, and no damage or destruction will affect any part of the creation. At that time, the world will be governed with great perfection. There will no longer be any need of God's attribute of judgment, and the world will be directed with absolute mercy and goodness. This will be beneficial for the world, since it will have been prepared and readied for such a system of governments due to the total removal of evil. Everything that is now hidden from the inhabitants of the world will be revealed to them at that time, as is written. God's glory will be revealed. This is now hidden from them because of their present abode, in which darkness prevails, so as to give them the possibility of serving God through being tested, as we have explained. In contrast, there is another phase of time when God distances himself, as it were, from this world. His judgment is not carried out and his sovereignty is not apparent. As a result, the world ought to be destroyed, except for even then, God wants the world to continue existing. He then keeps the world going through the power of his absolute majesty. Since his attribute of judgment would require its destruction, he makes use of his exalted power, which is not damaged or diminished by man's sins, in order to ensure that the world is not destroyed. But he does not bestow great goodness or benefit upon the world. Rather, he gives it only the most minimal level of subsistence, without which it could not survive. When the world is kept going through this undeserved bestowal of good, it does not become perfected. In fact, the opposite occurs. Not only does evil remain in the world, but it grows even stronger. It is just that God does not want his handiwork to be destroyed. Therefore, he sustains the world through the power of his sole sovereignty, even though justice would demand that it be destroyed. But he sustains it only at the most minimum level, as I have explained. Such a time it becomes clear that God's divine judgment needs to be enforced, and that this is the only way the world can be rectified. The world's situation of minimal subsistence, mentioned above, and the results in increase in evil clearly indicate this need. The natural world is not elevated to a state of true good, as it will take place at the time of redemption. Instead, the world is subject to the laws of God, arranged according to the system of divine judgment. However, since God distances himself and hides his presence from the world, his judgment is not carried out, and the world falls into a state of chaos and turmoil. The wicked hold sway in the world with arrogant pride like the wild beast in the forest. No one seeks to protect the weak, and everything becomes corrupted and devastated. Yet God still keeps the world going through the power of his will, which is not subject to any restriction. He keeps it going only at the most minimum level until eventually his divine judgment will shine forth, as is written, "My judgment will illuminate the nations, and I will give them respite." End of part 2.
Okay.
Good reading.
Yeah, Jason reads really nicely. Is your mother also a librarian?
No, we did used to do the reading for the blind, where we would go to the, there's a little radio station where they would send out these little radios to blind individuals, and then you would read like Baltimore Sun. I used to read children's stories for blind kids on there.
There you go. Wow.
Now it's by the Baltimore City Community College. They have a little station in there.
Wow. Ori, you want to summarize this bit for us?
I thought that it was mostly a repetition of before,
Yeah.
except that maybe in this paragraph he's emphasizing what is it that happens when he permits folks doing bad stuff to continue. He permits it, and as he does so, he hides his face, and the result of that is that they have a tendency to do even more terrible things. And then he says at the very end that the purpose of it, the eventuality is that that his judgment will come out, and eventually it'll be calming to the nations. I'm translating from Hebrew. Let's see what he says. My judgment will illuminate the nations, and I will give them respite.
Right.
Namely, the eventuality of him permitting the evil to kind of become more pervasive and more substantial is that in the end, he does return to bear his judgment, and the result of that ends up being positive as an eventuality, not immediate.
Right. Right.
How will this work if we're all dead? Like in a nuclear war?
There'll be minimal subsistence. Some people will survive. The mutants.
There's some guy down in South Africa, in Cape Town, that will survive.
Cher and Keith Richards.
Yeah, but then how will the nations? How will the nations? It just doesn't
Find
seem
respite.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Could it start again? I don't know if we are literal with the 6,000 years, that would be, I don't think that's actually possible. It's not enough time to repopulate the earth. It's making me think about, I don't know if you're familiar with Sfirat HaOmer, to count the Omer between Pesach and Shavuot for 49 days. So if you look in the Siddur, you'll see that for each day, there's a corresponding Sphira, right? There's 7 lower Sfirat, Chesed, Gvura, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. So each week corresponds to a emanation, a character trait. Within the 7 days, so there are 7 elements of it, right? So you'll find that on the first day, it's going to be chesed shebechesed, kindness within the kindness motivated by kindness. On the second day, you're going to get din shebechesed, right? You're going to get judgment within kindness, which is very much what he's speaking about here, right? That's one thing that, realize the loving God really likes to judge people because that brings the best out of them. So, etc., etc. So over here, I think there are 2 things. We're talking about God's majesty. That's what's called his unity, right? His achdut, he is not bound by anything. Ein od milvado, there's nothing besides him, even his own system. And judgment, right? Judgment as the revealed system in the world. So it can work 2 ways, right? What is motivating judgment? So you could have judgment, motivating judgment, right? Din shubadin. But you could have, malchut shubadin. You could have this. The very last thing is, to me, that God will bring judgment into the world because sins it's just, without that, there would be chaos and turmoil that would self-destruct. So therefore, God brings in judgment, right? And it could be the other way around too, meaning judgment might lead to God leading the world in a more like a hidden way, because the judgment says these people are not worthy of judgment, and therefore God hides him. That motivates God's hiding his face. So it's not, these 2 things are not just either or one on top of the other, but they actually are now interacting, as it were, or motivating each other. So that's what's happening over here. I'd have to go through, right, all 4. Is there 4 or is there even more? 2 factorial.
What do you, 7 by 7?
No, that's Sfirat HaOmer. I'm just dealing with God revealing his oneness, right, which is called Hanagata Yichud. God's one, running the world that way, which actually pushes judgment aside, right, and says, let people choose, right? Let people work it out. Let's see what let evil free. But then sometimes it evokes justice, right? Maybe that's a better way of looking at it. It sometimes pushes it away, but sometimes it evokes it. Maybe that's better than my whole Sfirat HaOmer drasha. Forget Sfirat HaOmer. We'll do that again when we get to Pesach. Yeah, I think that's the main point over here. That all right, if we go through this paragraph, sorry, I wish it was clearer to me. The first thing is, okay, God creates a world, allows for for the possibility of evil, and creates a system of judgment to guide that, right? So if people are on a higher level, little infractions and things like that will be judged. Then, however, if people become really bad, God removes the judgment and says, well, you know, judge, I don't want to force you. So he removes the judgment. Then the world goes into such chaos where God maintains it without any judgment. But then eventually it gets to a place, and maybe Jason, that's the answer, right? Is that this very last paragraph was the flood, where basically God had allowed the world to do whatever they wanted. And that's what the verses said, right? And the sons of men took the woman, and, you know, they did whatever they wanted. But and then until eventually his divine judgment shines forth. So yeah, that's what I think that very last line is applicable to the flood. Kind of God let the world go for a while, but chaos was and turmoil reigned the day, to the degree that eventually God's judgment was meted up against them. So what are we going through now with Ukraine? Is God sleeping?
Well, we'll see how people respond and what the world does, and we'll find out.
Right.
I think it's presumptuous of anyone to try and discern God's justice in current events like that, even on a scale this large.
I share that a lot, Gil. You know, we always use the ultimate example of the Holocaust. We don't always have to go to it. There's plenty of other things, even if they're, you know, smaller in numbers. But to the person who suffers or the person who dies, whether they were one of 6 million or one of 5,000, I'm not sure it's to them is all that different.
Mm.
But the evil that is happening in Ukraine is presumably, I mean, it seems it's not a judgment. I mean, I don't believe, I hope it's not a judgment by God of Ukrainians. Rather, it's the free will of human beings to behave as they will. And sometimes they rise and kill each other.
Right. Yeah, of course. Plausible to me. Also plausible that Russia is in a very bad way right now, partially due to our sanctions and partially due to the opprobrium and scorn that is being heaped on them from all measure. I mean, this has united the world. And, you know, you look at Zelensky addressed the parliament today, the House of Commons today, and you had the Labour and the Tories completely at agreement with each other. When have you done that? It's like in the House of Representatives for us, there's not a lot of political dissension among Republicans and Democrats about the nature of what this invasion is. That's rare in this country. It's rare in Great Britain. So Russia is in a bad way, and the Russian people are going to be feeling it as real, even though they didn't really have anything to do with it, because Putin's been, you know, had his thumb in charge over there for a long time. So the Russian people are certainly suffering too. Is that a judgment on Russia in any way, or is it really, you know, you get into very difficult questions, meting out any kind of discerning any kind of justice that's being done by God. So yeah.
Right. And I think Dan is right. It's too early to wonder if God is going to, bring down the gamut on Russia. Well, they just started their thing, you know. That's a long-term thing, maybe.
I think Zelensky did something very smart in where he, allowing the Russian soldiers to call home and all that sort of stuff, and in a nice way, sort of not dehumanizing his enemies, which in previous wars have been, you can think of the most jingoistic caricatures that you can imagine on posters and whatnot. Sort of, yeah, it's Putin's fault. It's all Putin, and like It's not the Russians. They're good people. It's just, Putin and his little oligarchs that are sort of controlling this thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a different tactic than from before.
We'll rejoice if Putin is brought low and if Zelensky's raised. I mean, right, that's the keeping with what this is. And I don't know how it's going to play out. Right. I hope it's the case that this guy is now an example for how, tyrants get disposed of. And Zelensky will be a model of how democracy can flourish and
Right.
unlikely heroes are made. So maybe that's how God acts in these things. I don't know.
The Samwise Gamgee of turn.
Well, more like that Simpsons episode where Homer's house burns down. And they're like, well, where was God? And they're like, well, all of these people who came and saved your house, that's where it was. More than that, that's largely what drives a lot of my religious impulses.
All right. I don't know if did everyone pre-read to 425? It's up to you. We
I
could.
got through most of it, but not all of it.
He basically goes through world history, and points out that there are 5 real. You can discern 5 stages where God's justice is at different levels. We can do it together next week, or we could just say, okay, we all read it. Let's go on to.
It starts to get easier. Some of the stuff, like, it gets it's just easier to read. It's not so
Yeah,
much.
This book's a bit of a yo-yo. Thank God. Otherwise, we'd be like, if it just got continuously harder, I think we'd be doing something else. I'm quite happy to start part 4 next week, but it's up to you guys. Is that okay? We'll just read through part 3, and then next week we can do part 4.
I will not weigh in because there's a good chance that I will be with a school group in the Kennedy Center next Tuesday night. So I don't know for sure, but I think that's what the plan is.
Uh-huh.
So if I'm not here, that's where I am. But I'll be back with you guys the following.
Great.